Hunter Andy is sharpening a drill bit. Today he plans to use it to break through the ice to catch muskrats. Besides missing their fur, he is eager to taste their plump, robust meat. After sharpening for a while, he tests it with his hand and finds it very sharp. Andy lives in the Yukon Valley, Alaska. While life here is tough for most, he considers it a paradise. There are endless king salmon to eat and moose, weighing over 1,000 pounds to catch. Next, he drills a hole in a stick and saws a slit into it. Recently, he accidentally crushed his pinky while sawing wood, making many tasks difficult. After attaching the drill bit, he tightens it with a metal hoop and secures it with nails. Now, his ice chisel is ready. As the sun rises over the mountains, Andy prepares his traps and sets out. His camp is located in front of the Yukon River, with a large lake a few kilometers away. The area is overrun with muskrats, and their dark mounds are their nests. Andy uses the ice chisel to locate the nest entrances and cuts an appropriately sized hole with a chainsaw. He places the traps through these openings. To prevent the holes from icing over too quickly, Andy covers them with cattail leaves. In previous years, snow sufficed, but this year it's only icing without snowfall. After covering, he starts on another hole. The lack of snow means traps are set later than usual, and the ice is now over 30 centimeters thick. However, as long as the holes are not frozen, there's still a chance. He sets a trap near each nest, and now just has to wait at home to see if he catches any muskrats tonight. The next day, Andy and his 3 dogs, including 2 new sled dog pups, arrive at the lake. The pups hover over the muskrat holes, seeming promising. Andy chisels the ice and slowly lifts the trap. It has been triggered, but no prey is seen, indicating muskrats are active underwater. He resets the trap and moves to the next. The second and third traps show the same result, suggesting an issue with the setup. So, he replaces the trap with a leg hold trap and resets it. Yesterday, Andy set 6 sets of traps, but the next few also yield nothing. He decides to add another leg hold trap below the original, one above and one below, hoping that more traps will increase his chances of catching prey. He will check again tomorrow. On the third day, the lake surface was covered with some snow, and the temperature had dropped to -12°C. Andy continued using an ice chisel to open holes in the ice, which was getting thicker and less suitable for setting traps. Fortunately, today's first trap had captured a muskrat. Although small, it was better than none. He swiftly moved to the second hole and caught another, larger muskrat. His luck didn't stop there. The trap he had replaced with a leg hold trap also yielded a catch. After a disappointing day yesterday, today, he scored 3 catches. He joyfully placed all the prey into a bucket. However, the next 3 traps were empty, even the one with 2 traps. Regardless of the outcome, he had to retrieve all the traps. The 3 muskrats were enough for a good meal for him, and provided fur for a pair of gloves. His trip was quite fruitful. Early in the morning, Andy was selecting wood. This year, the snow depth had not reached 10 centimeters. Without the cushioning of snow, it was not possible to drive a sled out. Therefore, he decided to build a sailboat that could operate on the ice. He took the selected wood into the tent, and after several hours, drafted a design that resembled the Tesla logo, with a minimum width of 2.4 meters at both ends to support its weight. Once the design was finalized, Andy immediately began cutting the planks, then polished them to smoothness. He also cut some stainless steel angles to reinforce the joints, as he couldn't afford to take any chances with the boat. After some tinkering, the sailboat's base was taking shape. With the final ski sleds fixed, the base construction was completed. The next day, Andy was installing the final canvases on the sailboat while also decorating the bow with deer antlers. After testing it by lying on top, he felt confident there were no issues. He tirelessly pulled it with a sled to a nearby lake, spending half an hour reassembling it to its original form. By evening, a strong wind had picked up over the lake. Andy and his sled dogs arrived, and as the canvas raised, the boat slowly started moving, gradually picking up speed with the dogs eagerly chasing behind. While he was thoroughly enjoying himself, a gust of wind snapped the mast made of aluminum, revealing its poor quality. Andy had to drag it home, where he replaced the broken mast with a steel pipe, drilling holes to reconnect the steel cables, this time strong enough to withstand even a force 10 wind. He returned to the lake to continue enjoying his sailboat. This time, Andy was having a blast, even turning sharply in strong winds without worrying about the boat's integrity. As long as there was wind, he could make several laps, using this opportunity to train the 2 new sled dogs. With the trapping season open in Alaska, some snow began to appear on the ground. Andy prepared to set traps along the nearby ridge. In this wilderness, fur was his only source of income. He arrived at a forest area on his sled, and from there, continued on foot. Once in the densely branched area, Andy began setting traps, primarily targeting minks. He set up a slanted pole with a trap at the end, using a piece of salmon as bait. Additionally, to better attract minks, he applied a strongly scented liquid to the area. To avoid getting lost in the forest, he made clear markings every 50 meters. With only a few hours of daylight in winter Alaska, it was already dark by the time he finished setting the traps. He randomly chose a spot and laid down some branches to spend the night, with a campfire being crucial to not freezing to death. Early the next morning, Andy packed up his gear to return home. One of his dogs scrambled at his makeshift bed from the previous night, as if to complain about having slept on the snow. On his way back, Andy checked the traps he had set the day before. He didn't catch any minks, but a squirrel had been trapped. Although squirrels also had fur, it would take hundreds to be of any use. He then moved to the next trap, where he saw mink tracks on a hillside. Joyfully heading to the next trap, he found yet another squirrel caught. Once the trap was triggered by these small animals, there was no chance of catching a mink. The remaining traps were empty of minks or any other game, which was normal for just one night. Andy planned to check again in a few days. Now, it was time for him to head home. Andy drove his snowmobile to a nearby town to pick up a battery storage system he had ordered. With the ground covered in snow, it was convenient to transport the batteries back on his snowmobile. These batteries cost him $10,000 and had to be transported back to his camp, 25 kilometers away. Previously, he relied on wind and solar power for electricity at the camp. As his electricity needs increased, these sources could no longer meet the daily demands, prompting him to invest heavily in a battery system expected to last about 20 years. Each battery weighed around 70 pounds, with 19 in total needing transport. His sled could only carry 10 at a time, meaning 2 trips were necessary. The advantage was that with this battery system, he would no longer have to rely heavily on a fuel generator. Transporting batteries required care, as they could not be knocked or bumped. Andy drove his snowmobile very cautiously, careful not to damage these valuable items. The first trip went smoothly, and after placing the 9 batteries on a prepared rack, he went back for the remaining 10. In this region, after each day and night cycle, daylight increases by 6 minutes. Having the system a day earlier would save a day's worth of fuel costs. Andy continued back to the town of Eagle to load the second batch of batteries. Despite each battery's 600 Ah at 1.2 volts only storing 0.72 kilowatt-hours, the total of 19 batteries accumulated about 13 kilowatt-hour, which might not sound like a lot but was sufficient for most of the camp's electrical needs. After placing all the batteries on the rack, the physical part of the project was done. Next was the technical part, connecting all 19 batteries in series and integrating them into the existing power system. A wiring mistake could destroy the entire system. Once he was sure everything was correct, Andy switched on the power. The distribution system was working fine. With the sunny weather, it was a good day to charge the batteries fully with the solar panels. As night fell, it was time to test the battery system. Andy switched on the power, transferring all camp electronics to battery power. The cabin lit up brightly, marking Andy's achievement of electrical independence, no longer fully reliant on fuel-generated power. The next day, Andy put harnesses on the 2 young dogs. Initially, he didn't let them join in, but had them follow behind to learn the behaviors and movements of the sled dogs. After running a few kilometers, he allowed them to join the team. Both puppies performed well. Before becoming sled dogs, each puppy needed to experience a long run and learn how to spend the night outdoors. Therefore, Andy took all 11 sled dogs to a camping site 10 kilometers away. Huskies and Alaskan breeds are preferred as sled dogs because they naturally enjoy living outdoors and exploring new environments, much like some people do. Andy anchored a launcher to the ground, loaded a few bullets into his shotgun, and set up a target on the launcher. Unfortunately, he missed the first target but hit the second accurately. Andy rarely used his shotgun for bird hunting, but having seen plenty of wild ducks on the lake, the prospect of fresh protein was tempting. Therefore, before setting out, he practiced his shooting skills. After continuous practice, he achieved a 50% hit rate, aiming to consistently hit a target at least twice in succession. With persistent effort, Andy finally mastered the shooting skill. Now, he was ready to pick some unfortunate ducks in the lake. After preparing his gear, he took his shotgun and headed to the lake. Black bears were still hibernating, and reindeer had not yet migrated here. The wild ducks were his only source of fresh protein. Seeing the number of ducks, he figured he might hit several with one shot. To approach the prey better, Andy chose to sneak up from the shore, using the bushes and grass for cover. He set down his backpack and crawled towards the lake. Once close enough, he stood up and shot. The startled ducks took flight, and unsurprisingly, he hit them given the number and distance. After 2 rounds of shooting, 2 ducks lay on the water. Andy picked up his prey, considering this lake his backyard if the Yukon River was his front yard. In winter, the area served as his muskrat trapping and sled dog training site, while in spring, it was his source of fresh protein. The ducks had not yet laid eggs and were at their fattest. The second duck was smaller, but Andy was not picky. He packed them all in his bag to take home. Back home, Andy began processing the game. He took an axe and chopped off the wings first. He wouldn't discard the offcuts. They were excellent bait for trapping minks in winter. Then, he plucked the ducks and wrapped them in foil to roast over charcoal. Before long, the delicious aroma filled the air. After a hearty meal, Andy got back to work. Since he injured his finger cutting wood last autumn, this was the first time he had used the sawmill. Learning from his past experience, he was now extra cautious when sawing. Andy's vegetables for the year depended entirely on what he could grow in the summer. Today, he was sawing wood to renovate his greenhouse, aiming to shorten the vegetable growing cycle by 2 weeks with the improvements. After a half-day's effort, Andy processed a pile of logs into lumber, ready to start the greenhouse renovation. He removed the old plastic sheets, replacing them with durable, wave-shaped hard plastic panels that offered better heat retention and would allow for earlier planting of various vegetables. After removing the plastic sheets, Andy cut the processed wood into shorter pieces to support the plastic panels, ensuring the roof could withstand the weight of snow. With all the beams in place, he was halfway through the renovation. Next, he laid out transparent plastic tiles and secured them with screws, completing the roof renovation. Then, he used a tractor to till the soil inside the greenhouse. Without this greenhouse, he would have to spend a lot of money to air freight vegetables from hundreds of kilometers away in Fairbanks. Though the greenhouse soil and vegetable seedlings were ready, after working for over 10 hours, Andy needed to rest. The next day, he brought the vegetable seedlings to the greenhouse, hanging up chili pepper plants. Within 24 hours, these plants would turn towards the sun. Andy had planted several varieties of peppers, as well as tomatoes, pumpkins, beans, and gourds. Now, with 20 hours of sunlight a day, it would only take a week for the vegetables to bloom and bear fruit. Soon, he would have more vegetables than he could eat. Andy also needed to prepare for catching king salmon. Due to various small tasks around the camp, his fishing had been delayed, and the salmon had already begun their migration. He was still organizing his fishing nets. In the spring, a landslide occurred near his camp in one of the river channels. It was the largest natural disaster he had seen in over 30 years, creating an opportunity for him to catch king salmon. The landslide created a backflow area, a rest spot for salmon during their migration. Andy took his boat to the landslide site. This natural disaster not only blocked part of the river flow but also altered the appearance of the Yukon River. He drove long stakes into the ground on the shore and set his fishing net at the edge of the rapids, positioned to catch king salmon swimming upstream from the backflow. He wasn't too worried about debris in the water taking the net away. Later, he would return to check for any catch. A few hours later, Andy prepared to check the fishing net he had set in the morning. For over 30 years, he had been exploring the most effective spots for catching king salmon, a delicious and oily fish essential for his winter food supply. However, upon arrival, none of the net's buoys were submerged, indicating that it was unlikely he had caught anything. Undeterred, Andy decided to check the net anyway. As expected, aside from a few sticks, there was nothing. The spot was good, and the lack of catch could simply be due to the short amount of time the net had been in the water. He decided to leave the net there for another 2 days in hopes of a better outcome. Alaska's summer days are long, and although it's already 10 p.m., the sun is still above the horizon. Andy decides to check the fishing net one more time before going to bed. The buoys show no signs of movement, and indeed, there are no fish caught. To add to his troubles, his boat capsized, tangling the propeller with the net. Fortunately, the net wasn't severely damaged. Sometimes, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. It seems like it's time for Andy to rest. After resting overnight, Andy sets out again. He isn't sure if he missed the migration period of the king salmon or if they just didn't show up. For the past 2 days, he caught nothing. If he doesn't catch any fish soon, he plans to move to a different spot. Today, from a distance, he notices the last 2 buoys moving up and down. Eagerly checking the net, the first thing he sees is a stick. Just when he thought he would return empty-handed again, a large fish mouth emerges from the water. Finally, he quickly pulls it up along with the net into his boat. On the boat, the king salmon doesn't look very large, but when Andy lifts it, the size becomes apparent it's a giant, even among king salmon. Even after burning several liters of gasoline over 3 days, catching such a fish makes it all worthwhile. Patience always pays off. Later, Andy sits by the Yukon River, enjoying a delicious meal. Fresh salmon paired with a vegetable salad makes an unparalleled delicacy. The melt-in-your-mouth sensation is so delightful that it's hard to describe. This king salmon swam 2,000 kilometers to end up as a delightful dish in Andy's bowl. It's safe to say that no hunter who relies on the Yukon River for sustenance could refuse such a treat. A few days later, Andy returned to the site of the landslide. Today, he wasn't there to catch king salmon but to collect the wood washed down by the landslide. Andy had built a 2-story cabin during the summer, but he hadn't been able to move a large fireplace upstairs. So, he recently designed a hoist to lift heavy items like water and firewood. The wood from the landslide was just the raw material he needed. As soon as the boat docked, the dogs eagerly rushed up. There was so much wood that it seemed endless. If you had the strength, you could haul it all back. Andy started collecting from the shore. Normally, he would need to cut wood on the hillside, but now, these trees were uprooted, and many good logs were buried under the mud. The last log was a bit heavy and far from the boat, so Andy dragged it to the shore to later haul it with the boat. Andy tied the log with a rope and pulled it along with the other collected wood, preparing to return. He only took 5 logs this time. Back at camp, he went upstairs, where there was already a fireplace, but he planned to replace it with a bigger one. He measured the height of the patio to get accurate dimensions for building the lift. All collected logs had to be debarked first to prevent pests and for aesthetic reasons. Then, using a chainsaw, Andy cut notches for connections. After several rounds of cutting and hammering, the elevator shaft frame gradually took shape. Andy manually flipped it over to connect the cement base and frame with nails. Each corner was fixed in the same way. The hardest part of the project was likely erecting the frame. He started by setting up a wooden post at the bottom of the frame and connected the top of the frame with a rope. Then Andy started the tractor and slowly moved forward. The process went smoothly at first, but as the angle increased, one of the supports broke, nearly causing the frame to collapse. Deciding not to stop and risk the same issue with a second attempt, he pushed on to erect it. Once up, the broken base was clearly unusable. Andy removed the broken supports from the base and replaced them with a new one. He then tirelessly installed a winch on the elevator, which would be the power source for the entire lift. Finally, he added the lift platform of the elevator. Even the new fireplace he was installing was handmade by him. Without the lift, he wouldn't have known how to move this 200-plus-pound fireplace. Andy placed it in front of the elevator frame using a tractor, then manually moved it to the lift platform. It was now time to test the fruits of his labor. With a press of a button, it took just half a minute to reach the patio height. Then, he moved it to the second floor with a trailer and connected the fireplace chimney. The project was complete. With this fireplace, the room could stay comfortably warm even in temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius. Andy had invested a lot of time and effort into building this little cabin to enjoy the beautiful views of the Yukon River. Sitting on his self-built patio with a chilled beer, there were probably few who could enjoy life more than Andy. Every summer, the farm is likely where Andy spends most of his time. He needs to water the vegetables daily and weed them. So today, he plans to build an irrigation system. In front of him is a pile of various water pipe fittings. He now needs to assemble them all. During the 2 to 3 months of summer, he aims to grow a year's supply of vegetables, hence the need to invest significant effort in weeding and watering. An irrigation system would not only reduce water usage for irrigation but also free up much of his time. Andy installs the assembled pipes to the outlet of the water reservoir. After confirming water flow, he starts laying the ground pipes. The main pipes are made of white PVC, while the other areas use black hoses. He installs irrigation heads, each with a capacity of 2 liters per hour, at every 20 centimeters, so that all crops receive uniform watering. Once he turns on the switch, the entire irrigation system works smoothly. Previously, Andy had to fill the reservoir twice a week, but now, once a week is sufficient. With the watering issue resolved and the planting area expanding, the old compost wooden box is no longer sufficient. He plans to build a larger compost box. Andy takes a boat downstream to a riverbank where many logs washed down by floods are available, most of them bark-free and ready to use. He immediately starts the chainsaw and cuts the logs into manageable lengths. Although they are dry and not light, living in the wilderness inevitably involves a lot of physical labor. The upside is there's no worry about gaining weight because there's always more work to be done. After collecting a full boatload of wood, he immediately returns home and starts building the compost box. Constructing the compost box is relatively simple. First, he creates an eye-shaped frame, then cuts the logs to the same length, carves grooves, and stacks them up, securing everything with nails. The height is perfect. Andy then gathers compost materials, including coarse wood chips, fine sawdust, and fresh wild grass. He layers coarse wood chips at the bottom, wild grass in the middle, and sawdust on top. Andy annually prepares compost for next year's vegetable planting. For him, these are next year's tomatoes, pumpkins, and winter melons. He stacks the materials, alternating layers of wood chips and green grass until level with the frame. The reason for building an eye-shaped frame is to use one side for mature compost and the other for fresh materials. The final step in composting is to thoroughly water it, causing the grass and sawdust inside to decompose and heat up. After a year, it turns into nutrient-rich black soil. It's no exaggeration to say that in this wilderness, Andy can easily catch thousands of king salmon from the Yukon River and harvest deer and bear meat from the surrounding forests. However, securing a year's supply of vegetables is actually the hardest. Fortunately, he has his own greenhouse and vegetable garden. With time and effort, he can obtain these essentials. Every summer, the automatic fish catcher is a crucial tool for Andy to obtain food for his dogs. In previous years, it could catch 500 king salmon in a day. However, after 15 years of continuous use, the wood has started to rot, and the floating barrels are taking on water. Therefore, it needs to be completely disassembled and repaired. The migration of the king salmon will arrive within a week, and Andy must seize this opportunity to stock up on winter food for his 11 sled dogs. Missing their migration period would mean catching none at all, which would be disastrous for his dog's survival through winter. Andy first dismantles the netting, then the side supports, exposing all the floating barrels. The wood's decay is severe, and if put in the water in this state, it might break apart. Andy uses a tractor to drag both rows of floating barrels to an open area. The first task is to repair the two metal barrels, cutting and welding as necessary. Building a new fishing water wheel would take 8 days, but Andy is only allowing 3 days to repair this old one. Fortunately, he has 2 large machines to assist with the repairs, along with a collection of handy tools. After a day's work, the 2 rows of floating barrels are restored to their original function. Next, he positions the large fishing net in between the floating barrels. If his wife were still with him, this task would be much easier. She could help measure distances and adjust the position of the net. It's worth noting that when Andy worked with Kate, he was often irritable and quick to anger. Since their separation, his temper has improved. Perhaps a case of learning to appreciate what you had after it's gone. After positioning the net, Andy starts installing the side supports. He uses the tractor to lift them slowly onto the floating barrels, using braces to integrate them with the barrels. The same steps are repeated on the other side. With the supports installed, it already looks like a fishing water wheel. Before putting it into use, Andy checks the location where the water wheel will be placed. This year, the water level in the Yukon River has dropped significantly. He goes to the spot where he usually places the water wheel and finds the water level has dropped nearly a meter. This location is no longer viable. He needs to find a new spot about 4 meters from the shore, with a water depth of 2 meters. Walking upstream, he watches the depth gauge on his boat and soon finds an ideal spot. The water flow is moderate, perfect for the fishing water wheel. 2 steel cables are key to ensuring the water wheel isn't washed away. Andy drives 2 stakes into the ground on the shore to anchor them. Then, he returns to camp and uses a bulldozer to drag the water wheel into the water. After the repairs, this antique can be used for another 10 to 15 years without any problems. The sight of the robust dogs shows that following Andy means they are well cared for. Next, he uses a boat to take the fish catcher to the previously prepared location. Not all salmon migrations can be caught with this automatic fish catcher. The fewer king salmon must be caught with nets, but the more abundant king salmon can be caught with this device. He secures the steel cables and fixes the crossbeam off the shore. The setup is now complete. As the netting lowers, the water flow gradually starts to rotate it. After several days of hard work, it's time to see the results. If all goes well, this device will catch thousands of king salmon within 5 days. Just a few minutes later, the first fish of the year is caught. The next few days will be Andy's busiest. Andy boarded his small boat with a shotgun in hand. Besides his weapon, he packed a tent, sleeping bag, and dry food. As winter approached, it was time to stock up on meat. Once it snowed, temperatures could drop to -20°C, making hunting challenging. Today, his target was still a moose, a large animal that could provide food for half a year. For this, Andy had brought an extra boat to access narrower river channels. He traveled 50 kilometers to a small island, an ideal camping spot with good visibility of both riverbanks and no concern for predator attacks. He immediately set up his tent on the shore. With some time left in the day, Andy took his shotgun and went to try his luck. Moose usually inhabit food-rich wetlands, the first places he looked. Walking along a dry riverbed, he noticed large areas of flattened grass, resembling moose tracks. Andy used a tool to mimic moose calls and waited. Only a group of wild ducks responded, and with no moose in sight, he headed back. On his way, he spotted fresh bear tracks, but his focus was on moose. The next day, Andy returned to the wetlands. A large marsh like this should have moose. Today, he found fresh moose tracks in the mud, likely left last night or this morning. Andy mimicked moose footsteps in the stream, then their calls, hoping to attract a bull moose. However, after half an hour of waiting with no sight of moose, he decided to search elsewhere. But before he had gone far, he spotted a bear standing on the shore, staring at him. As the saying goes, timing is everything. After spending 2 fruitless days searching for moose, Andy decided to take his chances with the black bear today. He fired his gun, and the bear ran off faster than a rabbit. Andy calmly reloaded, knowing that no animal could withstand a bullet for long. Following the bear's escape route, he climbed a slope into the forest and found the downed bear. It was just bad luck for the bear to encounter a seasoned hunter like Andy. Instead of processing the bear on the spot, Andy decided to bring it back to camp, where even the scraps would feed his dogs. Hunting in Alaska often means setting out for moose and returning with a bear, or aiming for beaver and ending up with duck. Regardless, it's all protein. The thick fat of the black bear is perfect for winter, and the valuable bear skin was a bonus. Andy cut the bear into 4 pieces to fit into meat bags. Now with enough meat for winter, it was time to head home. Back home, Andy smoked the excess meat and brought a leg to the butchering table to break it down for storage in the freezer, making his 2 dogs drool in anticipation. Generously, he sometimes shared a piece with them. Once the bear meat was ready, he paired it with some greenhouse-grown vegetables and grilled it over charcoal. Andy savored the hard-earned meal, thoroughly enjoying the taste of his efforts. After solving the short-term meat supply issue, Andy turned his attention to storing vegetables. Many vegetables in his garden were ripe and ready for harvesting. Vegetables like tomatoes were fully ripe and needed to be picked before they spoiled in the ground. Although Andy is seen as a hunter, he is actually an expert in agriculture, growing various vegetables including 4 or 5 types of peppers, as well as both white and red radishes. His cabbages are exceptionally large, a testament to his diligent care and good planning. This is a true example of hard work paying off.